Welcome to Jonathan's podcast. Today we're going to talk about something many believers have never even truly examined. Why so many Christians still cling to holidays that have clear pagan roots, like Halloween and Easter. Why Christians are clinging to these holidays, I'm going to try to explain. It's not easy because so many things are wrapped up in tradition. It's difficult at best to try to get people to do things differently. But we're going to investigate that now, and we're going to talk about it. Why? Why? Yeah, I asked myself that many times. I asked myself, why do people continue to do this? I mean, it just makes no sense to me. But most of the holidays celebrated in the modern church didn't come from Scripture. They came from pagan culture, centuries after the time of Yeshua and the apostles. For example, Easter. Now, can you imagine Easter being blended and these other pagan holidays being blended in with the cross? I mean, the name Easter itself was the Anglo-Saxon goddess of fertility and spring. Her symbols were eggs and rabbits, the same ones we see in our church today, in all our churches today. In the church parking lots, we celebrate these things with Easter egg hunts and all these different things, saying they're using them for outreach programs. Outreach programs. There's nothing wrong with outreach programs. In fact, they're one of the most important tools the church has today of reaching people who would never ever come to church, or who have never been in church, or who have left the church because of church hurt. But are we using these things in the right way? Or should we be using them at all? And I'm talking about these pagan days. Easter egg, the bunny, candy for the kids. I mean, I guess there's nothing wrong with that, huh? We can do that. It's not really celebrating the pagan holiday, is it? There have been many calls for separation of the church being involved in any type of pagan day. Jeremiah 10:2 says, "Lean not on the ways of the nations." And then in 2 Corinthians 6:17 it says, "Come out from among them and be separate, says the Lord." The early church refused to adopt these pagan customs. They didn't try to make them Christian friendly. They stood apart. That's why there's light shown so brightly in the dark world. How can we be a light in the dark world if we're got one foot in darkness and one foot in the light? The truth is, we don't need to borrow the world's darkness to reach the world's hearts. Real outreach happens through authentic love, truth, and holiness. Not by blending in, but by standing out. We are the light of the world. So we should let our light shine before men. And that's Matthew 5:14 through 16. But instead, we keep one foot in the darkness and one foot in the light. And I don't know why we do this, but we do. So, again, Jesus didn't rise on Easter Sunday. He rose during the Feast of First Fruits, which followed Passover almost simultaneously, because we're talking about 3 days. Jesus didn't die till 3 o'clock in the afternoon on Passover, and he rose early in the morning on the 3rd day. So he was only gone for a little over 48 hours, if you want to get technical about it. But it touched 3 days. Almost simultaneously in this First Fruits, you have Passover, then you have the Feast of Unleavened. That's when he was buried, and we'll get into that. He was without sin. Unleavened means without sin. And then the First Fruits, he was the first fruit unto the dead, the resurrection. Now, people say, well, Lazarus was resurrected. Yeah, but he's going to die again. Jesus is not going to die again. Okay? Over time, the early Roman Church changed the date to separate believers from the biblical calendar. We're on the Gregorian calendar. We need to be on the biblical calendar, the calendar God gave the Jews. It's called the Hebraic calendar. Believe me, if you want to keep in tune with what's happening in the world, get yourself a copy of the Hebraic calendar and use it. In 325 AD, there was a council of Nicaea. They officially divorced the resurrection celebration from Passover, replacing God's timing with man's. Man's timing. I mean, we are to obey God, or are we to obey man? Now, we know as Christians, and I don't think anybody believes that Jesus was actually born on December 25th. That wasn't his birthday. Although it was selected by pagans, actually the Romans, who still had one foot in Christianity and one foot in paganism. It was the festival of Sol Invictus, the unconquered sun. The pagan Romans celebrated the rebirth of the sun at the winter solstice. Early church leaders tried to redeem it and said, let's worship the sun, S-O-N, instead of the sun, S-U-N. But in doing so, they mixed truth with error. If it's wrong, it's wrong. God never told us we had to celebrate the birth of Messiah. He only said to remember his death and resurrection. I'm not saying we shouldn't celebrate the birth of Messiah, but I'm saying we weren't told to celebrate that. Now, and what about Halloween? Let's see. It's probably the most demonic day of the year. In Numbers 28, it talks about the appointed times of God, the Feast of First Fruits and Shavuot. We covered that. Let's look at this. In Luke 22, he says, and when he had taken the matzah, the bread, and offered it, he broke it and gave it to them, saying, this is my body given for you. Do this in memory of me. That's what we're supposed to be doing. That's why we do communion. To do this in remembrance of the Lord and what he did for us. So what about Halloween? Its origin is even darker. It comes from the Celtic festival of Samhain, marking the end of harvest and the start of winter, when the veil between the living and the dead was believed to open. When Christianity spread through Europe, the church tried to Christianize it, creating All Saints' Day and All Souls' Day, but the problem is the old practices stayed. Even today, believers dress up in costumes and decorate with skulls, ghosts, and deaths, all while claiming it's just for fun. But what about communion? Have we mixed communion with light and with darkness? Second Corinthians 6:14, come out from among them and be separate. To be separate. So why do Christians still hold on to these holidays? Well, I'll give you a few reasons. Tradition. We grew up with it. It feels normal. Our culture, society celebrates it. We don't want to seem different, do we? Ignorance. God says, my people perish for lack of knowledge. Many don't know the roots of these things or were never taught the difference. Good intentions. People say, I'm not worshiping a pagan god, I'm celebrating Jesus. But here's the question. Does God accept worship mixed with things he calls an abomination? I think not. He says, do not worship the Lord your God in their way. The heart may be sincere, but sincerity doesn't equal obedience. It does not. God already gave us his holy days, his Moedim, his appointed times. They're not Jewish holidays, they're the Lord's feast. Leviticus 23, these are my appointed feast. He didn't say these are your Jewish feast, and only the Jews can partake in these things. Each one points prophetically to Messiah. And let's just go over that a little bit. I'll give you a list in a moment. On Passover, Jesus was crucified. On the Feast of Unleavened Bread, he was buried. On the Feast of First Fruits, he was resurrected. On Shavuot, or Pentecost, on Pentecost, the outpouring of the Spirit. But people, Shavuot is Pentecost. Pentecost is the Greek word, Shavuot is the Hebrew word. Shavuot was celebrated for centuries before the upper room in the 120. The next feast is the Feast of Trumpets, or Ram Teruah, and in modern times they call it Rosh Hashanah. Those are the first fall feast. The first spring feast were fulfilled by Christ already. But the three fall feasts are yet to be fulfilled. Many believe including myself, that the Feast of Trumpets, Ram Teruah, and again they say Rosh Hashanah, which means head of year. It's the year they believe that God created Adam and Eve. So they celebrate it as a new year. That's when the rapture of the church will take place. And the reason is because in Matthew 24, God, Jesus, gave us a hint. When the disciples asked him, when will all these things happen? He said, he gave them a list of things that were going to go on, but when we were going to be called up, he says, no one knows the day or the hour, not the angels in heaven, nor the Son, only the Father knows. No one knows the day or the hour. That's what he said. Now, just so happens that the Feast of Trumpets, Ram Teruah, Rosh Hashanah, the head of the year, on the 7th month, on the first day of Tishri on the Hebraic calendar, it's a 2-day festival. And the reason they do it on 2 days instead of just one is because all new months on the Hebraic calendar start on the new moon. And the new moon, as you know, is just a little sliver of the moon in the sky. And it started on the testimony or witness of 2 people who would see it and then report back to the Sanhedrin and tell the high priest, we've seen the new moon, we can start the feast. Now, if it were cloudy, they couldn't see the new moon, so they'd have to wait until it was visible. Of course, today we have programs that tell us where the moon is at any given time, and whether it's a new moon, a quarter moon, or full moon, we know. It's on our calendar. But they didn't have such things back then. So they called it the feast that no one knows the day or the hour. I think we were given a hint. Now, we still don't know the year. We don't know the day, because it could happen in 1 or 2 days. And we don't know the hour. But we sure do know the season. And the next feast would be Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement. Christ's return and Israel's redemption, when they say, Barak haba b'Hashem Adonai, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. And the next will be the Feast of Tabernacle, called Sukkot, of the 1,000-year millennial reign of Christ. Those are the 3 fall feasts, and they will be fulfilled because God is an early God, and he never leaves anything undone. These are eternal appointments, not pagan, not commercial, prophetic, and pure. Should Christians return to the feast of the Lord? Remember, they're not the feast of men, nor the feast of the Jews, the feast of the Lord. I'm not saying we should celebrate them. I'm saying we should study them and realize that these are dress rehearsals. Read about what the Hebrews did, how they celebrated them, and you will see all of these feasts come to life. And you'll see what I just told you to be true. So here's a challenge. If we truly want to honor God, we can't keep blending truth with error. The early church tried to make faith more palatable to the world, and in doing so, they lost something sacred. These feasts, remember, are not man's. They belong to the Lord, not man, and were given as dress rehearsals of things to come. God is orderly. He's going to make these things happen, and he's going to fulfill all 7. But in Romans 12, he said, do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. If you don't read these things, if you don't study these things, you won't understand them. And if someone leads you or tells you something different, you're going to believe it because you don't know any better. And not knowing is not an excuse, because God says his people perish for lack of knowledge. So that you may know, discern what is the will of God, what is good and acceptable and perfect. Pagan days are not what is good and acceptable and perfect. We must return to the foundations, to worship in spirit and in truth. Joshua said, just as the Israelites rebelled and worshipped the Amorite gods, are we so unschooled as to continue celebrating what God says is an abomination? If it seems bad to you to worship Anani, then choose for yourselves today whom you will serve, whether the gods of your fathers worshipped that were beyond the river, or the gods of the Amorites in whose land you are living. We're living in the land of Amorites today, and if you can't see it, you haven't even watched the news. If you can't see the rebellion, if you can't see the lawlessness, and if you think, well, this is just a phase we're going through, this wokeness, this LGBTQ, this transgenderism, this all these things that are demonic as can be, Satan has leashed all of his demonic powers and demons on the world. And it gets worse, folks. It's not going to get better. Read the scripture. Nowhere does it say it's going to get better, not to worry about it. It's going to get worse. But for me and my house, we choose to serve the Lord and worship Anani, not pagan days or pagan holidays. Now, we'll say this about Christmas. You want to celebrate Christmas? That's a great thing. You know what? There was a guy named Nicholas, and I've done some research on this, who years ago used to give money to poor people until he died. Matter of fact, he gave away all of his wealth and he died a pauper. Therefore, thus Santa Claus. So what we've done is we've taken what St. Nicholas did by giving away things, with the 3 wise men giving gifts to Jesus at his birth. And so we have St. Nicholas, and we have the gifts, and we have a tree, and we look at the tree and say it is everlasting. And we put white lights on our tree because it shows purity. And I don't put an angel on top, and we don't do this. We put a crown, because we are celebrating the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. And we honor him. And there's nothing wrong with celebrating Christmas. Even though we know it's not really his birthday. But at least we chose a day to celebrate him and his birth. And if we keep focused on that, then it's not a pagan day anyway. It's a true story of a man named St. Nicholas. They call him St. Nicholas, who gave away his wealth to the poor. So, I'm going to go back to There we go. I'm honored that you would listen to my podcast today. We need to stay awake. We need to stay in the Word so that we can have that discernment, so we don't end up trying to mix anyway, because you can't mix it, light with darkness. My wife and I and my family do not celebrate Halloween. The lights aren't on. We don't pass out candy. You can say, oh, how cruel. The kids come around with their bags wanting candy and you don't even give them candy at the door. I am not partaking in this pagan holiday, in this day of darkness, the most demonic day of the year. My wife and stepdaughter went out yesterday and drove through our entire neighborhood praying over our neighborhood, because our neighborhood is stockpiled in yards of skeletons and witches and stuff that scares kids when they come to the door. A witch will jump out at them, or skeletons in a yard, and graveyards and everything else that's demonic is laying in the yard. We're not partaking in any of that celebration. I don't care if you dress them up like a fairy princess from Disney, you're still partaking in what is a pagan, demonic holiday. Not doing it. Remember this. If you don't remember anything else, and I hope you do, remember this. Obedience is better than tradition. God bless you.